Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Yeah, man, that thing is stuck. That Bill Clinton dipset, dipset. That's definitely like 90s aught humor. It works, though. It works. Even I could tell even Anoa thinks it works. Joining us now is Michael Brooks Show crew and host of The Way with Anoa. She is one of the most brilliant minds in American politics and a recent guest on the BBC World Service. Anoa Changa, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, that was an awesome introduction. Thank you. The BBC was like the highlight. I mean, that was sweet.
That was very sweet. I loved it. I loved watching it. I loved watching the anchor.
It's not as amazing as being here with you, though. So, yeah,
well, of course not. I mean, this is the root. But that was very cool. Like, oh, no, Oprah Winfrey. And you go, no.
Well, real quickly, like,
yeah,
they wanted Dr. West. And the person who was doing Dr. West's booking, he didn't want to do it. He's like, I don't want to talk about that. So they were like, well, do you know anyone else? And she was like, yeah, I know this attorney. She's pretty dope. Let me connect you. And so that's how I got to be on the BBC. Dr. West didn't want to talk about Oprah, so I got to do it.
That's awesome. Although that is really funny. I like that, like, Dr. West will take on anybody, anytime, anywhere, any place. And he's just like, no, not Oprah. Forget it.
He's like, it's not. He said it wasn't worth his time.
Yeah, it's not worth it. It isn't worth his time. I appreciate that Dr. West has better things to do than that. I buy it completely. Anoa, you just spent time in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. You were with a grassroots, reconstruction and action group there. I guess, like, from both ends, just kind of give us an update, both in terms of, like, I know you saw the type of inspiring stuff that we're promoting and talking about and you are so in touch with all the time. And then, of course, like, the vultures are out for a place that they never left.
Like, it was an amazing experience because, we know intellectually that Puerto Rico is, Puerto Ricans are Americans. That's still us too over there, right?
Yep.
But, like, still, once you go there, and you see, and it's just like the feeling that you have in terms of, when we look at any of our communities here stateside that are left behind, it's similar, but it's on just a larger scale because it's an entire, island, it's an entire country full of people that in many respects have been completely disinvested, decimated, and left behind by the United States government. I mean, that's the legacy of colonialism in Puerto Rico. Yeah. What was cool with the group that I went with, they did relief efforts back in October into September, like when people were first able to go over. They raised money, they took supplies over, and they rented vehicles and went up into the mountains where FEMA had not gotten to people and were delivering goods. So what we did when I went last month, we followed up with the communities and the people that they had met on their first two trips. We went back kind of to follow up and to start, they're in the process of doing a documentary now to kind of document that mutual aid relief work, that grassroots assistance work, because so much of what's getting done for people is still people helping people, whether it's neighbors, whether it's, actual nonprofit groups, grassroots groups. That's so much of what's getting done, because when we were there last month, there were still warehouses of supplies sitting there that weren't being distributed to people. Like, we would ask folks every time we went to place, like, so have you guys seen FEMA? And they're like, we'll see the FEMA sign. They might have come by here once, but for the most part, it was, and some folks have lost everything, right? You have people still living in houses that have no roofs or walls. But they're still going to make sure that the elderly neighbor down the road has food. Like, it was an amazing spirit. And just quickly, two places we went. We went to Humacao. There's a village up in the mountains. The village is Mariana, but there was the area where they were feeding upwards of, like, I think at the height of things after Maria, they were feeding like 300 to 500 people a day off donated food. And they're really looking at a sustainable model. They have solar panels up there now. They had a group donated 2 water towers to the area so they could have fresh water instead of having to go buy bottled water. And they're really trying to create something that's long-term. So not just responding to the crisis that was the aftermath of the hurricane, but something that's even longer and more sustainable for people. As folks may have seen, the governor is now talking about privatizing the electric company, which is it has its own issues on both sides. But that was a really rewarding experience to talk to the folks, working, organizing there. And then we were also in another smaller town, where this smaller community, people, about 25 families, were cut off from the main part of the town because there was a bridge that connected them to the other side. The bridge was completely wiped out by Maria. And so they were stuck on the other side of the river. And so they had to ford over, or they had to use kind of like a zip line type of thing to send over supplies. So there's a local construction company helped make a makeshift bridge. Now they're finally, I think some folks from Boston are helping them build a brand new bridge, but their mayor helicoptered in, said some words, and really hadn't done anything. It was the people in the town who would caravan over and find a way to send goods over. When we were there last month, there were still some family members of the people that were the initial group that were trapped, they called them the Camp of the Forgotten. There was another section not too far away that was trapped behind a mudslide still. People could climb out, but the area itself was still trapped behind a mudslide. So these are the things that we were seeing, but you would expect, with such devastation, with such, we're still now at 33% of the island still does not have power. You would hear, when we were there, they were talking about oh, the grid is 60% up. Well, even at 60-70% of the grid up, you still had 50% or more of the population when we were there last month without power. Both houses we stayed in had no power. There was generator access, and that's a privilege to be able to use a generator. Having run a generator in West Virginia for a week, it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's really expensive.
No, that's
to
very
do it for
expensive.
months.
Yeah.
To do it for months is insane. And so some of the places we met, some of the places that we went that we're wondering, with some of the adjustments that have been made. I know they found a stockpile of equipment that was never dispersed like it was supposed to be recently. But people were saying when we were there that they weren't expecting to get power back till July of this year, from what happened in September of last year. So
what was the name? I have a quick follow-up question. But first, what was the name of the group you were with?
The original group was oh God, you asked me something.
No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Because it was just some organizers from the original group.
Got you.
I'll give you guys.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure we have info and tweet out if there's a ways of people to link up and support these efforts.
I have tons of links to share and stuff.
Okay, so we'll include some of those in the show notes and tweet them out on Twitter and everything.
Definitely.
The question
but I just will say real quickly, there are so many of these efforts. People were raising money for solar panels for hospitals. People are raising money. There's several different organizations stateside, nonprofits that are raising money for direct support on the ground outside of the government assistance and funding that isn't really going, at least it seems like, to the masses of people across the island where it needs to.
Do you feel and I think it was Rebecca Solnit. I could be mispronouncing her name, and I apologize if I am. But she wrote a book several years ago where she took Katrina and I think a couple other examples of crisis. And her argument was that in a lot of examples of human catastrophe, I think she focused primarily on things like hurricanes and floods, things that were not human created, things that were inflicted by nature, where there was a lot of harm and disruption to people's lives. That while there is a public narrative and a media focus that, things are bad, so, the bad guys come out and, and there's violence and people get stuck up and people, and the sort of the strong prey on the weak and everything. That actually, at least, and that is, true on a policy level, right? There's always the opportunity. I mean, we saw what vultures do to New Orleans after Katrina or to Puerto Rico. But her argument was that on a community level, people actually do a lot of what you saw in Puerto Rico, that people actually support each other a lot. People actually have a lot of sort of bottom-up ingenuity and compassion and solidarity. And I think one part of it to me that always struck me is that, for a broader support for the politics that we want, not in a naive way, not in a saccharine way, but we need to have some pretty strong faith in human capacity. And I was just wondering, what your sort of thoughts are on that type of sentiment after, this experience in Puerto Rico and seeing like the vultures, the failures of government, the abuse, the exploitation, but the communities, people doing right.
Well, I think even when we look at like historically, like we look at development of previously depressed or underserved areas, right?
Yeah.
Just look at regular gentrification.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add on a either environmental or something that was man-made, some type of disaster. It's like people might joke about it, but it really is real. The land grab that happens, the way people come in and swoop down, because I forget what the numbers were, but like the number of people who were leaving Puerto Rico daily has been like huge. And that's a huge drain on the human capital and potential to revitalize and bring things back, right?
Right.
But at the same time, when the resources are not being put into the people, when people don't even have a say, because you have PROMESA, you have so many different layers of oppression financially, among other things, right? Economic oppression on the island as well. It does create a condition that's ripe for quote unquote investors or other folks to come in and swoop down, buy a property, push people out. I changed my Twitter name. This goes into this to Adolfina Villanueva. And Adolfina Villanueva was murdered by the state in 1980 for refusing to cede her land. The land had been in her family. We were in Luisa, Puerto Rico. That's an area that was settled by former enslaved Africans and their descendants, along with Tainos. And, Adolfina, they had beachfront property. And they wanted to do slum clearance. They wanted to clear everyone out and develop the area. But she was murdered basically for standing her ground and refusing to let them put her family out of the area. Because of that, that community is still there now because of her stand. But like, this is historical, right? It's exacerbated now because of Maria. What happened with Katrina after New Orleans after Katrina, like it gave people the ability to do what they've already been putting the design on communities that they feel are not deserving to have proximity to particular goods or areas. So I think that's a really fair way of looking at it. It's problematic, but it's more reason why we need strong bottom-up support and mutual aid, not just in a time of crisis, but long term, so we can start turning and creating sustainable, ability for us to maintain space and community.
And maybe expand space. I mean, maybe start to reverse, all of this encroachment, all of this primitive accumulation, and actually sort of restake community commons and collaboration. I mean, because that's, because I feel like the other thing, and it feels counterintuitive to frame it this way, but one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about recently is that even though, of course, like we're under unbelievable stress, and of course, that descends to zones like we're talking about Puerto Rico. I mean, ripe for even more exploitation. And this is a place that is absolutely, and I want to be very clear about this. This is not. It's historically colonized. It's presently colonized. There are literal, legal, economic impediments to its own ability to perform economically, and it does not have the opportunity to either have independence or full statehood. So that's not like historical recognition or campus articulation. That's literally what it is, and there's an opportunity for all sorts of vulture capital to come in right now. There's no doubt. Yet at the same time, I think it's also very important for us to also articulate that, ultimately our task is not just resistance. We actually want to develop a world that, is reflected in these communities, so that these same capacities can come through in moments of incredible stress, come through in moments to, create community, create sports, create art. We look even at historical, social democratic experiments that did have some success in places like Sweden or Germany, or community efforts, in Jamaica. And if we're being real, some efforts in agriculture and other things in Cuba. Those things were about like, everybody should have good gymnasiums. People should have, access to art. People should have, clubs and community. These things kind of coming together are vital for resistance, but they're also potentially an enactment of a more, really open and democratic world across all spheres.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely agree. I mean, I think that as we continue to think about like even what I looked at over there and thinking about the folks who I was with and thinking about our own work, right?
Hmm.
We've crowdfunded a presidential campaign,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yep.
We're supporting progressive candidates all over the country. There's grassroots activism organizing that's starting to take hold and take root, and a lot of what we've been able to do is without some big donor
Yep.
just growing it. So how can we continue to look at the mutual aid model and not just simply in a time of crisis when we have to hurry up and get resources because people are in desperate dire need, but how do we leverage that, like we were just talking about, and expanding space and building community and actually driving sustainable change the way we need to see it versus waiting for whatever group to come in, which oftentimes they're more extractive of resources and human capital than they are actually investing into these communities where we're all living. But the other thing I was just thinking about is I was talking with H. Rap Brown's son. H. Rap Brown is formerly H. Rap Brown, Imam Jamil. His son was saying he lives over in the West End community, historic neighborhood here in Atlanta, and he was talking about the idea of gentrification.
Hmm.
And gentrification is something that does not have to happen to us, right? Is what he was talking about. And he was talking about basically a similar type of thing of people pooling their resources, kind of like what immigrants used to do back in the day. You come over, you work hard, you pool your resources,
Hmm.
and that's how you start building your ground. And I think that for marginalized communities that have had a very different relationship economically with this country, we need to redevelop the way in which we're approaching how land and development is handled within our communities. And so we need to look at new models instead of just trying to assimilate into the American dream model because it doesn't include us. It wasn't meant for us. So we have to think smarter and outside of the box and find a way to do what needs to be done while saving space, because there's no reason, for families to be displaced from communities they've been in for generations.
And it's, by the way, it's going to include less and less of us as that pie becomes smaller. So the time is really
Absolutely.
for every single person and every single community and also us collectively to really reevaluate that model. As a final thought, and obviously we're going to talk again very soon, and it's been too long. We finally got to hang out a couple months ago, which was dope.
We finally got to hang out, and I will definitely let you know when I'll be in DC definitely in April, but I'll let you know when I'm coming to New York too.
So, because I don't go to DC, so you're gonna have to come to me. DC's lame. Much love to DC patrons, but
No, I have a meeting. I'm on the board of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, and we have an in-person meeting in DC, so that's why I'm
I
going.
love the black lawyers. I love them. They do.
Well,
they say good things about.
These are radical revolutionaries who represented Angela Davis and the like back in the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah,
so.
sure. I bet you don't like Mueller either. Totally terrible guy. I saw what they did with COINTELPRO. Horrible stuff. Totally unfair. I'm a victim of COINTELPRO in a certain sense. I like that. Black socialist sympathizer Trump. Along with but in the as you look out across the terrain, and you mentioned it, and you're so clued into all of the, like when you talk about these insurgencies and these movements and these community buildings and these radical politics, you're not just sort of like, name checking. You're on the pulse of it, and you cover most of this so well. When you look at 2018 and we look at the juxtaposition of the Democrats, they just embarrassed themselves with this silly
yes.
gambit, which, it's so frustrating in Noah because it also failed by at least guys like Clinton and Blair, they knew how to fuck their enemies up. Yeah. And these guys don't know how to, they don't have the moral passion, and they also don't have that ruthlessness. And it's
they don't have the balls. They
don't
have the balls to follow through.
Yeah. Exactly.
We have a little thing we did with PA.
No heart, no balls.
Some of the PA folks did a little thing. We did a little PA mixtape. Give the Dems a backbone mixtape. And one of my contributions was Nuck If You Buck. I'm in Atlanta now, so I gotta represent for the A. The way to see
you're like Chuck Schumer's. I don't know what that means, but I think that black people are very nice. But when you look, Jesus, besides those people at the top fucking up, when you look at this broader terrain, and and you have smart critiques of Bernie, but I do feel like, always got to give Bernie some props, because to me, he's still the only one at the top level.
Right now.
Yeah,
we played him now streaming, right?
Yes,
talking about healthcare.
Talking about healthcare, we played it before. Like, he's delivering. What else is happening across the country where people are just, making these moves and acting with the heart and the balls and the backbone and the and the ratchet music to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you need some backbone. Like, I was just thinking about like music that got me amped, and Ben and some other folks chimed in or whatever. We were like, we are so ratchet, but like this is the hype when you gotta go fight the enemy.
Yes.
Like, you need some hype music.
Yes.
You can't be like, oh, McConnell promised that we talk about it later. You sound like a girl waiting for her boy to propose after.
Yeah, I was going to say not
years.
fiance.
Well,
that's a pre-fiance conversation.
like it was really bad. And again, like thinking about, how do we build these movements? How do we do this work? Because there's so much across the board, state level, that we need to work on, as well as, the larger federal issues. And I know people don't like the word incremental or incrementalism, but we really need to look at like small chunks, winnable things. We're still working towards the longer term, bigger picture goal. But if we start also getting some smaller term actual like wins under our belt too, that helps us feel good. You get more confidence. Yes. You start building more of a collective, and you keep moving forward to the larger goal. Whether that larger goal is the complete decimation and takeover, the complete decimation of the Democratic Party, complete takeover, or something completely different, whatever that is, you need to clarify and be purposeful. But we really gotta pull ourselves together and really start upgrading ourselves. Listen to some Beyonce, y'all.
Dipset, 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 dipset.
Dipset on my list.
Come on, I'm ready. I got this. Joel Santana.
Yeah, like Killer Cam. See,
Killer Cam.
They just need to listen to Killer Cam, and they'll be okay. They would have Mitch McConnell. What really bothers me? Hey,
Kanye, is this that 70s hair-on flow?
What really bothered me though about the 72, the 60-hour shutdown was the fact that in 2013, Ted Cruz threw a damn hissy fit about the ACA.
Yes.
There was nothing to negotiate on. It was settled law. They had no ground to stand on. And yet instilled Ted Cruz and House Republicans, because remember, Ted is in the Senate. He went and talked to the dopes over in the House to get them to have a shutdown.
Yep.
And for 16 days, they held the government, at a standstill and came out with nothing.
Because they don't care. But they came out with a win in the sense of their momentum and their way to push the ball forward. And that's what these fucking nerds need to get. Anoa Changa, The Way with Anoa, Michael Brooks Show crew, thanks a million. I can't wait to talk with you soon. I know I'll be on your show soon.
You will be on my show soon, and we have business to discuss. So peace, my brother. I love you.
I love you too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, folks. We're going to get to the pyramid in a second, but let's take a couple more minutes.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos